Hello, I'm David Ward, the Beth Chatto Gardens, and I'm Nursery and Garden Director. And we are standing in the water garden, so complete contrast to the dry, drought-resistant gravel garden, just a few metres away really, down into the water gardens. So the planting here is totally different. Obviously the conditions, we have water just below the surface really in some areas, and ponds, so lush foliage. Lots of later flowering perennials as well, you notice more flower here. The general feel is much more lush, even after this summer.
Well, David, thank you for talking to the Affinity Water podcast series in the second of our autumn look at how to keep your garden spruce, but not use hose pipes. So we're in the water gardens, but presumably you don't water them.
No, we don't. No, we don't water the gardens. We're very lucky here because it's a natural spring. I know, very few people have those conditions. Most people, if they have water, a pond, it's a lined pond. So you just have to bear that in mind. But yeah, it's a natural spring. There's water just, feet, maybe inches, some places below our feet. And the plants are chosen accordingly. Again, it's that theme, right plant, right place. Some of the grey, drought-loving plants would just look so out of place down here as well, as they would curl up and die, it's too wet. So plants like astilbes, hostas, big foliage ferns, lots of late flowering perennials, persicarias, etc., rudbeckias in flower.
And some lovely yellow daisies and purple flowers in bloom.
Yes, the nature of the wet garden is the plants do tend to flower a bit later. So in the winter, it's pretty bare actually. It's good because we can then see all the bulbs that come up in the spring, but perennials have really mostly died down. There are very few evergreens down here. So plants like the yellow daisy there, the rudbeckia, that would be totally flat in the winter, but now it's a metre high, full of golden yellow flowers. Attracting all the pollinators. Unfortunately, the plant in front of us is just sort of going over a bit, but you can still see the spikes of pink flowers. That's a persicaria, a type of knotweed, but a very well-behaved knotweed, not a Japanese type knotweed. And then plants that actually grow in the water, so a North American pickerel weed, Pontidaria cordata, with its blue flowers this time of year.
Now, I presume that even the water garden didn't escape the hot summer that we've had. It must have had some impact.
Yeah, no, it has. I'm just standing in front of these persicarias, so you can almost see probably what we should have done here in retrospect. So we've got lots of dying foliage that obviously got sun scorched, got too dry, but then you can see all that lovely fresh new foliage coming up. So probably we should have followed our own advice there and used the secators and cut them right back to the ground, which we do actually on the nursery. And okay, they would have looked a bit bare for a few weeks, but they soon would have shot up again and flowered as well. So, maybe we'll learn from that this summer. That's something perhaps that we should have done with this particular group here.
Now, most people, they may not have. Let's walk a little bit around this beautiful water garden and a little bridge. I hope I can just.
Yep, you go first.
I can tread over it without slipping over, but we're now looking at what is a very large pond, and people might not have wet gardens, but they certainly have ponds in their garden. Is there any kind of advice you can give them after the drought in the summer?
Well, to be honest, now is a good time to sort of be looking at ponds. You don't want to be doing much in a pond in the spring because there's all the activity, the wildlife, but now, if any, is a good time. So, falling leaves, get out any debris. Maybe if there's a build-up of mud at the bottom, it's a good time to do that. Obviously, just leave it on the side so any creatures can jump back into the pond. So sort of general maintenance, really, it's a good time. But, if you've got water lilies and there's dying leaves, just take them off. Anything you can do to reduce the dead leaves and the organic matter sinking to the bottom of the pond, that will... that's a good thing you can do.
And you wouldn't feel tempted to actually get the hose pipe out and just top up your pond. That's a no-no, is it?
Yeah, absolutely. We're very, very lucky here. It's a naturally spring-fed pond. It's really one of the reasons that Beth and Andrew Chatto, who were just below their house, came and settled on this site in the 1960s, over 60 years ago. The fact that there was water here. So we're very, very fortunate. Water adds so much to a garden, so to have a pond in your garden most summers is going to be a benefit. If you need to fill your pond up, if you obviously fill your water butts up over the winter. Maybe you can keep your pond going. It might be a bit low, but if you can keep some water in there, it would benefit.
And people might feel tempted to top up their pond simply because, look, in the spring you have tadpoles, you have frogs, you have wildlife living in your pond. Therefore, you might think, well, let me top it up with the hose.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of a balance, really. Yeah, I mean, luckily the time the tadpoles and the frog spawns there, most ponds are relatively full after the winter, and your water butt you'll have enough to keep you going at that time of year. But you certainly don't want to be just topping your pond up because you like to see a top. Maybe obviously if you have fish, you've got to bear that in mind. I would encourage people perhaps to have a wildlife pond. Fish are not really that important. The fact that you have water in your garden will increase the diversity of insects and wildlife visiting your garden. Obviously, if you've got hedgehogs, don't leave. Make sure they don't just fall in and got no root out. Make sure there's a little ramp or there's shallow areas that actual animals can get out of. And of course, beware of children. Always beware of children.
Okay,
Yeah.
so the advice really for your pond in the autumn in this Affinity Water podcast series, it's to the same with the garden. Take out the dead leaves, rake it. Don't be tempted to top it up. But
No, it'll fill up naturally in the winter.
or use your water butt.
Or use water butts as they fill up. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, just water is such a benefit in the garden. So do consider making a pond even if you don't have one.
And was there anything that particularly you thought, oh no, when we had this long hot summer this year, and any changes you're going to make as a result of it?
Well, obviously our sort of lawns have took a bit of a hammering. Not so much in this part of the garden, although we have kind of visitors, hundreds of visitors sometimes a day. So there are pressure points on the lawn. Again, people don't have that in their back gardens, but so the lawn was a bit of a concern. I mean, we certainly didn't water the lawns. Well, we didn't water hardly at all, really. We just trusted to God and the police, as they say.
Let's come on to lawns in the third part of this series, but let's just walk to the other side of the water gardens. And it's amazing how green everything looks. I mean, was it brown at one stage in the summer? Has it just flourished and come back?
The grass has certainly recovered where it can. Obviously in areas under the oak tree, for example, water can't get there. You've got a huge, great 300-year-old oak tree here. So, the grass is taking longer to come back there because there's no water going on it. Whereas in the bed there, you can see some cyclamen in flower. And what an ideal drought-resistant plant bulbs are, because they disappear in the summer. You don't need water, so they start to grow in the autumn, sort of Mediterranean sort of cycle. So as the autumn rains come in the Mediterranean or drier areas, the roots start to grow. Some, like the cyclamen, flower in the autumn. Most bulbs flower in the spring, but that's the cycle of a bulb. It's dormant in the summer. So cyclamen, if you've got dry shade, brilliant plant.
And also a takeaway from the water gardens is, as you said, there's plenty of wildlife. You don't necessarily need fish in your pond, in your garden.
No, not at all. I mean, there are wild fish in here. There's a few rudd. We have had carp, wild carp, not ornamental carp. But unfortunately, over the years, heron. We have mink and otter in the area, which are lovely to have otter, but they do eat fish. So we have no carp left now. No, but I would encourage people to have my pond at home is a wildlife pond. I have no fish, but it's full of tadpoles, and I did have newts, but they seem to have disappeared a bit. I don't know why. Wildlife pond, go for it.
And a wildlife pond, and make sure the hedgehogs can escape.
Absolutely, yeah, and young children as well.
David, thanks for talking to the second part of the Affinity Water podcast series on what to do in your garden in the autumn. And here we are standing at the water gardens at the Beth Chatto Garden. So on to the lawns next.
Yes, okay. We'll look at various parts of the lawn. Obviously in the water garden it's quite green, but other areas as we go much up towards the sand and gravels, it's a different story, but we'll have a look.
Thank you.